नमस्श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. Today we shall discuss something about Maya. Is it real or is it a myth? Some time back we studied the Jnana Yoga lectures of Swamiji. In those Jnana Yoga lectures, we studied the three beautiful talks of Swamiji on Maya, the lectures he had given in London. Maya and illusion, Maya and the conception of God, and Maya and freedom. Three excellent chapters where Swamiji beautifully explains the meaning of Maya. So this is the word very frequently used in this culture. The world is Maya, the world is Maya. So in many movie songs also, this concept is explained, talked about. But do we really know what Maya is? Do we really know the full import or depth of the word Maya? What strikes us when somebody utters the word Maya? For some, actually, it is magic. Maya means people think it is magic. Or for some, actually, the idea that strikes them first is illusion, Brahma in Sanskrit. But Swamiji took a lot of pains to explain in those three chapters that Maya doesn't mean illusion. Maya doesn't mean magic. Okay. Maya is a statement of fact, he says. It is not illusion, it is not magic, it is not a theory, it is a statement of fact. It is a reality, the way we experience things, a statement about the way we experience things. So Maya is not a simple word. Maya is not magic, Maya is not illusion. It is reality. The way we experience the world is Maya. Why? Swamiji clearly says there that our life is full of contradictions. If you just look at life and death, pain and pleasure, poverty and affluence, all the pairs of opposites you just take. The relative world is full of pairs of opposites. They just alternate with each other. Why should it be like that? But that is the way it is. Why should it be like that? We don't have a satisfactory answer. If you get a satisfactory answer, then it's not Maya. Because it is not definable. It defies all logic. Okay. Then because of that it is Maya. If you can satisfactorily explain it, if you can explain it logically, then it's no more Maya. We hope for so many things in our life. How many of our hopes or desires will get fulfilled? But still we struggle, right? We hope against hope. You just take the contemporary society. For example, education. Many people are under the impression that education is the panacea for most of the problems of our society, right? Since independence or in pre-independence, the last 3,000-4,000 years, we have been struggling and striving to educate people for what? Education actually helps us to go beyond all kinds of suffering. Has it really helped us? Or actually has it made us, more susceptible to pain? If you just analyze, an educated individual suffers more than an uneducated individual. Why has it happened like that? An educated person should suffer less. An uneducated person should suffer more. That's why actually we long to educate ourselves. Why the reverse has happened? Our objective was something different. Our goal was something different. Something else has happened. Why is it so? But that is the fact of life. Your nerves become keener as you educate yourself. An uneducated man, his nerves are that keen, and so he suffers less. You have enhanced your capacity of joy or happiness. Higher joys and higher happiness is possible for you You can read a good book. You can listen to a good piece of music. You can enjoy a piece of, a beautiful painting. All these things are possible to you because you have cultivated your mind. You have become more refined because you have had education. But at the same time, the same education which has helped you to appreciate life in a better way, to have higher pleasures possible to you, the same education has made you susceptible to misery also, to the same degree, or if you ask me, actually to a greater degree. A little abuse is sufficient actually, not to actually cause little pain to you, to make you get wounded. You will get wounded. When abuse is sufficient, if you are an educated man. An illiterate man, you just abuse him, he doesn't bother. He doesn't take it that seriously. Even if he takes seriously, he will take it seriously only for that moment and afterwards he'll forget it. But whereas if you're an educated man, you can't forget it. You will keep it for life. You will remember it for life. And your pain is more poignant. Okay? Your pain is more poignant. Similarly, technology. Technology is supposed to help us solve the problem of life. That's the reason we have invested so much of time and energy in the last 150 or 200 years. Post-industrial revolution, we say, how much of time and energy, how many scientists, how many technocrats have worked hard to create this kind of material prosperity. Has it helped us to reduce the suffering in the world? Has it helped us to increase happiness for man? If you just look at it, if you just analyze it, but it has not really helped us. Technology is supposed to create us more leisure, right? What actually 10 people used to do in the past, now a machine does in no time. That means you should have got more leisure. More leisure at your disposal means more happiness, right? You don't have to work hard because machine does things for you. Earlier days, people used to toil a lot. But now all the comfort has come to us. But has it helped us to enhance our happiness? Has the problem of life actually has become less complex? No. Why? We don't know. So technology actually has helped us to, gain little physical comfort, but the discomfort has become all the more at a mental level, at a psychological level. Now you tend to compare yourself with others, how many material things he has or she has, your neighbor, and how many things I have. So this comparison, I don't have, this sense of lack, okay, that causes suffering to you. And also, as so many things we have invented, so much of luxury is available all around. You go for that luxury, you want it. Not that you really need it, but you want it because some people have it. And you also want it for yourself. So that you need more money. So you'll have to struggle more, you'll have to work more. Whereas technology is supposed to give you more leisure, but rather the educated man, the modern man, the man of the 21st century has no rest at all. He has to work even in weekends also. Right? It has not given any rest to you. The thing that rather than just see life 50 years back, it was far simpler. This much of technology was not available. This much of physical comfort was not available to the generation that lived in the past, that they had more leisure. Because of that, they could celebrate festivals in a better way than what we celebrate. Today we are in a hurry, we are in a rush all the time. When you are in a hurry and rush, how it is possible for you to enjoy peace? Not possible. You need to be, peaceful from within. You need to have leisure for intellectual development or spiritual development. You just want to say some prayer to God, but you don't have time. You want to meditate, but you don't have time. You want to read a spiritual book. To read a spiritual book and to understand, to comprehend ideas, you need to have that quality of focus. But that quality of focus is not available to you because you are in a rush, you are running, because you have to run. Now, urbanization. We have thought actually it would help. It's a better way of living than actually living in rural areas. But has it helped you? Has it solved the problem of life? No. It has complicated it further. So in a rural area, if you want to construct a house and 3-4 lakhs or 5 lakhs, you can construct a house. In an urban area, you want to purchase a flat, it costs you 50 lakhs. And to earn 50 lakhs, 20-25 years of hard labor. Okay? 20-25 years of hard labor just to, purchase a flat. Just to have a dwelling place, you have to work 20-25 years of life. Invest your life. And then, where is leisure for you? Where is the scope? You go for EMIs. And as soon as you get into that EMI mode, you will have the tension. Suppose if you lose your job midway through, Corona has affected so many people psychologically and financial problems, then terrible tension, right? Life was far simpler before, but the technology, the urbanization, whatever that you have done, which is supposed to uh, bring ease into our life, but rather bringing ease into our life, the urbanization or the education or the technology, where we have invested heavily in the last 200 or 300 years, has done the reverse. Why is it so? But it is like that. There is no explanation, but that is so. Right? This is Maya, Swamiji says. You are struggling hard actually to reduce your pain, to reduce your suffering, to have more joy and more happiness, but the reverse is happening all through. Do you notice this? You need to notice it. The reverse is happening. Why? He says that our life is actually full of contradictions. We go for happiness, but we get misery. Why is it so? You need to think, you need to reflect. So he said, as long as our people, our rishis have long discovered this, as long as you have this mind, you will have these pairs of opposites, a little pain, a little pleasure, a little joy and little suffering. All these things, they come together. Because they are not cut and dried to separate existences, good and evil. We want to avoid evil, we want to have only good. But you increase good and proportionately, the evil also will increase in the world. They go together. Had they been to separate cut and dried existences, then we can separate and take only the good, to the exclusion of evil. But that's not how the world is designed. The world actually, these two things, they go together. So our rishis ask us, pause for a moment, analyze the nature of the world. If you want to increase good, you have to increase evil also. There is no other way, there is no other option. If you want to increase happiness, you have to increase misery also. This is how things are. This is how actually the world is designed, the world is constructed. So, then what we need to do? So, we are trying to solve the problem in the relative. We are trying to solve the problem in the relative. There is no solution in the relative. There is no solution in the relative. In the last class we discussed also. So if you go to God, why actually there is so much of suffering in the world? Why have you created such a miserable world? God will ask you the question. Who is asking this question? So your answer is, I am asking the question. God will tell you, who are you? Then you will tell that, I am so and so. You will give your name. God will tell, I have not asked your name. Okay? Then you will tell your father's name. God will tell actually, did I ask your father's name? I have asked actually, who are you? You have only 4 or 5 options. Either you will tell your name or your father's name, or at the most you will tell your profession. Who are you? Again, God insists actually. So I am a doctor, I am an engineer, okay? I am a chartered accountant. You will tell your profession. What else you can do? Or you will say, I am a Hindu. God will tell you actually, did I ask your religious denomination? Or you will tell, I am an Indian. Did I ask your nationality? God will tell. I am asking, who are you? You have no answer, no satisfactory answer. You have not actually tried to ponder on this question. So God will tell you, before you ask me why did I create the world, go back and find out who you are and then come back to me with the question. So if you find out actually the mind disappears, the ego disappears. Once the ego disappears, you understand that there is no creation separate from you. You and the creator are one and the same. But to put this question, to turn inward, is a big problem for us. Our greatest consolation is majority are like us. Okay? We have the wonderful company in the world. Company of fools. I am a fool. I have the company of fools. I am myself a fool. I have the great company, a big company. Whose company? So that is the consolation. But if you have the company of people like Buddha or Vivekananda, then your life would be completely different, right? But you don't have that much of fortune. So one fool actually, the Upanishad says, Andhe niyamana yathamdhaha. It's blind leading the blind. Avidyaya mantare vartamanaha. Tayam panditam. They think actually they are the pandits, they are the knowledgeable people, they are the learned people. Janghanyamana paryanti mudaha, the Upanishad says. So they get deluded and then they constantly, they suffer misery again and again. So andhe niyamana yathamdaha, it's like blind leading the blind. So who are the real beacon lights for us, whom we need to follow? So these are the Yuga Purushas, Buddha, Vivekananda, Shankara, all the saints and sages. How did they perceive life? We need to ponder into their lives to understand the mystery of life. So we'll get the right guidance. So we want more happiness, but we are not getting that. It is not there, our philosophy says. Don't try to solve the problem at a relative level. At a relative level, you will never get the answer, satisfactory answer for this world. You need to transcend the relative. You need to transcend the mind. Now you ask the question, You are actually within the realm of time and space. And you are asking the being who is beyond time and space for an explanation for this world. You will not get it because he will not give you the answer. So, but the possibility is that you can become the absolute. You can transcend the relative and you can go to the absolute. That is the possibility we all have. No, Swamiji, I don't want to make an effort. I don't want to exert myself. I don't want to do any spiritual sadhana. You give me a satisfactory and rational explanation for this world, for the suffering that is there in the world, for all the opposites and for all the contradictions that we see in this world. If you put this question, I don't have a satisfactory explanation in the first place. And also, even if I give you a reasonably satisfactory explanation, there is no guarantee that you will subscribe to my opinion, my understanding. You may say that it's your opinion, your understanding. So you all have to grow from within. There is no other option here. Maybe my explanation, if you is more convincing, you may subscribe to that, to my opinion, but it will not solve the problem. It's opinion after all, at the end. But these opinions will not solve. You need to transcend the relative. When you get to the absolute, you will get the answer. As long as you're in the relative, you will never get a satisfactory, rational explanation for all the contradictions that we see in the world. So our rishis have pointed out, have told us again and again, the whole world is actually the perception in your mind. And also, no two individuals have the same perception. No two individuals have the same perception of life. You just see an illiterate man, what kind of perception he has of life and what kind of perception you have. You may be having a little better perception, but it's all a perception in the end. Again, there is a lot of difference between one individual and another individual. The way we see life, we think actually we are all seeing the same world. No, not at all. No two individuals have the same objective in life. No two individuals have the same goals in life, right? Different people have got different goals and different objectives. We discussed this point. Somebody who wants to become rich, actually, for him actually a rich man, a billionaire will become the ideal, the icon. Somebody who wants to enjoy power, for him actually a politician, somebody who is wielding great power, that individual will become an icon for that individual. And for that, some people actually wants to have popularity. For such people, somebody who has attained a lot of popularity, that individual will become an icon. So different people have different objectives in this relative world. Though we all have got the same mind, same in the sense we all have got the mind, but the mind is not the same. The perception varies from person to person. That depends upon your samskaras, your desires. Just as my desire gets projected outwardly, and so I see the same world. As I said, that if I have love for power, and any individual who is wielding a lot of power, he will become an icon, he will become a role model. He will become my God in a way, this world. This is what I desire, what I long for, what I hope for, he has already attained. So I want to be like him or her who has attained that. So we have different goals and different objectives and different perceptions. Okay, this perception will evolve over a period of time. So the goal of education or the goal of philosophy, a goal of culture is to help you evolve your perception of life. Because the present perception is not life, not satisfactory, in the sense that it's not helping you to solve the problem of life. It is causing you a lot of suffering. So you want to overcome suffering, you want to avoid suffering, you want to go beyond suffering. So you have to enhance your perception of life. To what extent? Till you get the perception of life of a Buddha or a Vivekananda or Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. They had the absolute perception. Our perception is not absolute. Because anything that you perceive through the mind is a relative perception. It depends upon your samskaras, your desires, your objectives, and that depends your perception of life, your understanding of life. So how to enhance the perception of life? How to have a better understanding of life? For that, you see, suppose if we say, we know that actually mind is made up of three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. Tamas is impurity, the greatest impurity. Rajas is also impurity, lesser impurity. Sattva is still lesser impurity, but it is impurity. So you need to go beyond these three gunas. When you go beyond these three gunas, you have that Shuddha Sattva state. That is consciousness. That is, we have transcended the relative. So it can't just happen like that. If you want to transcend the mind, you have to overcome tamas with rajas and rajas with sattva. So the higher impurity you have to overcome with the lower impurity, and then afterwards actually you have to drop that lower impurity also. Then you will transcend the mind, just as actually you are transcending it every day in deep sleep. In deep sleep, where you have no mind, you are in a really peaceful state. That is the state. So if the same state continues for you for 24 hours, you are enlightened. In deep sleep, you are the happiest guy in the world. Okay? Everybody is the happiest man. Every day is happening, but for a few moments it is happening. Out of 24 hours, maybe for a few minutes, you are there in that state. The rest of the time it is mind. The mind means noise, mind means conflict, mind means struggle. Swamiji clearly says, wherever there is struggle, there cannot be peace. Struggle and peace, they go ill together. So for peace to get, for you to get in absolute peace, absolute state of joy, you need to transcend struggle, you need to go beyond all struggles. But you need to understand that mind means struggle, body means struggle, because it's constantly changing. You don't want to change it, you want to preserve it, right? Why people are so afraid of death now? This virus actually is causing terrible fear in the individuals. Because you want to preserve the body, but it is changing. Because it is life, there is the opposite of it, death. It is there already. But you want to ignore that, you want to let go that, don't want to pay any attention to that, you want to forget that. But it's not possible. It is there already. It is there already. So, Swamiji says beautifully elsewhere that the way you are constituted, the way, if you think that you are the body and mind, they are constantly changing, right? They are constantly changing. How can you have eternal peace and happiness with entities that are constantly changing? It's illogical, right? But you are longing for. What you want, if you ask an individual, I want eternal peace and happiness. I don't want to suffer. I want to be in happiness all the time. When there is death, how you can have happiness? Right? When there is death, how can you have happiness? Not possible. So then you have to reflect. What is death? For whom death is? For the physical body. Then the question should arise in your mind. Am I the physical body? What is my real nature? Right? What is my real nature? What is that dies in me? That me and the body are one and the same? Or I am something different from the body and mind? So you reflect. So this, to turn inward, to reflect and to ponder deep on the nature of your existence, you need to have sattva. You need to have that inward temperament. Our rishis were so meditative that they could meditate for years together, right? Blissfully. With bare minimum they survived and they sustained themselves, and then they would meditate for months together, years together. And they were full of joy from within. And they touched the transcendental, the immortal dimension of their personality. And then they could drop body at will. No death, deathlessness. Deathlessness they had attained. An absolutely blissful state. They realized that our real nature is the absolute. Then they laughed at the whole universe is a dream. It's just a projection of the mind. Mind itself is unreal. Your perception, your understanding, everything is happening in the mind. So our Vedanta says, that the philosophy says, so your perception is totally erroneous because the mind itself is unreal. How you can have reality through the unreal? So they told us, transcend the mind, that's all. What you need to do is transcend the mind. So how can I transcend the mind? So what it is based on? It is based on ego, it's based on desire. Drop the desire and drop the ego and see what happens. That's why to drop the ego, to drop the desire, you need to have courage. Kaschid dhiraha pratyagatmana vaikshat. That courage comes to you when you can see the beyond. That courage comes to you when you see the beyond. Now you are not able to see the beyond. You are not able to even imagine. But you need to intuitively perceive. At least you have to have a belief in the words and sayings of these rishis. They have said that you are immortal, you are deathless. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, this Atman is actually, there is no death to it. The fire cannot burn it. The air cannot dry it. The water cannot wet it. Weapons cannot cut it. Because it is not matter, it is spirit. That is your real nature. You are not the physical body. It is indecent if you identify with the body and say that I am the physical body. It is indecency of the highest order if you ask me. But we are living that kind of indecent life all the time, saying that I am the body, I am the body, I am the body. There is a higher dimension to you. You are that infinite spirit, immortal spirit. It is not in our experience as yet because you have to do sadhana for that. Where it has become chronic to us. We are so deeply identified with the physical body, it's not just this birth identification. Previous birth you had identification, before that birth you had identification. With that identification you did so many karmas, actions. And so this identification has become so chronic, it has become a kind of disease with us. That's why in our culture they say bhavaroga. You have got body, you have got mind means you are already sick, you are already in disease. Bhavaroga. So the definition that they give for God is bhavaroga vaidya, is a bishak. So you have to approach God, you have to surrender to the will of the Lord, to get out of this bhavaroga, to get rid of this disease. So the body and mind are the disease. The higher, the third dimension of your personality, that is soul or God, or consciousness. You can realize it, provided you need to turn inward. But now the world is full of rajas and tamas. Full of rajas and tamas. And so the rajasic and tamasic people, they seek happiness only through things external. Okay. in our Upanishads, in our Puranas, they call such people who are only extroverts, outgoing all the time, thoroughgoing extroverts all the time. They can't look into themselves. They can't just analyze the perception. Pain comes to you. What is the nature of the pain? What is the seat of pain? What is the source of pain in my being? People are not even reflecting for a few seconds. They are just weeping and crying all the time. Oh, I experience the pain. This is responsible. That individual is responsible. This individual is responsible. I don't have that. I don't have this. Fine. But what is the seat of pain in your being? You just turn inward and look, and you will just find that it's the mind. So then what is the mind? The question should arise if you are a being with discretion, and if you are an individual with some kind of awareness, some kind of wisdom, you will turn inward in no time. But now the fear comes actually. So nobody actually has turned his attention inward. I alone has to do it. I alone have to do it. What is that? How can that be? You think others are right? No, they will turn sooner or later. They will have to turn inward and get to the real personality of their own being. They have to conquer the mind. There is no way. So Swamiji clearly says that you are seeking solution in the relative. In the relative, there is no solution is possible. This world, actually, no logical explanation can be given of this world for the happenings in this world. You have to transcend the relative. So the experiences are happening in the mind. You have to transcend the mind. That is the language that they use. The mind is a kind of ghost. It frightens you, but it's not you. You are something beyond that, but now you are deeply identified with that, and that's why the ghost is frightening you. The greater the impurity that you have in the form of tamas, and the lesser the possibility for you to turn inward. So you have to increase the quantum of sattva. For that you need to reduce the quantum of tamas and rajas. How does that happen? Through spiritual sadhana. You just repeat God's name, Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namah Shivaya, as best as you can and as many times as possible, but with love and with full faith in the power of the divine name. The tamas will be burnt. Mind becomes more and more sattvic. It becomes easier for you to apprehend the truth, to experience the truth that is within. Today our world is such, day and night, the whole universe is meditating on matter, meditating on material things. You know what will happen with this kind of meditation? You are doing unconscious meditation. Constantly when you are thinking about the objects of the world, the nature of the human mind is such, it gains the properties of the gunas of the object on which it meditates. That is the reason Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, the individual, actually, an ideal spiritual sadhaka will be an individual who will not have a house of his own. Navaduta Gita also, it comes in the Bhagavatam. So what did you learn from a snake? The Avaduta says, I have learned something from snake also, because for 24 gurus he had. I learned from so many inanimate things and also creatures. I learned something from Kapota, something from this and that, something from a snake also. What did you learn from a snake? A snake doesn't build, a hole of its own. Some other animal, rats, they make the hole, burrow, and it will go and stay in that. It will not waste its time and energy, building making a hole for itself. And python, what did you learn from a python? He said, I learned. Python doesn't move for its food, it just stays there. Whatever the animal that comes in its way, it will just pounce upon it, and then it will kill it and eats it up. An ideal spiritual sadhaka should live like that. That requires great courage. That's why Upanishad talks. A true spiritual seeker is a dhira manava. Because you need a lot of courage. You will have the fear, how I will get food. As long as you prarabdha lasts, you will get your food. Even if you go to the Himalayas and hide in a cave, your meal will come there if you have real faith in God. The Lord also says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ananyah chintayanto imam paripasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vaham yaham. Whoever meditates on me, whoever thinks about me, you go anywhere to the remote corner of the earth, the Lord will arrange your food. You will get it, but do you have the faith? No, we don't have that much of faith, right? We want to provide for ourselves. So we struggle, But if you want to provide for yourself, you struggle only to the extent that bare necessities are provided for you. To that extent only you need to struggle in this world. Beyond that, all the luxuries, all the desires that you have, you want to be on par with somebody else. He or she has a better vehicle, he or she has a better house, actually, I need to be like this. So whole struggle, whole life goes in that. And I said, the more you meditate on the objects of the world, the more you think about the objective world, the more actually your mind becomes gross. It becomes more tamasic and it gains inertia. it gains inertia, and once it gains inertia, it can only see the physical world. It can't really see the spiritual world. That's why Swamiji says, the history of civilization is progressive reading of spirit into matter. But there is no civilization as such, he says. Very loaded statement. The history of civilization is progressive reading of spirit into matter. Now you see the objective world, world of name and form, which is world of matter. But that is not real. Our philosophy says, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, Brahman alone is real, consciousness alone is real. The objective world, the world of Nama and Rupa, the world of name and form, the world of phenomena is unreal. The world of matter is unreal, but it is so real for us. It's so tangible. Why it has become real? Because of the inertia in the mind. Because constantly we are meditating on objective matter, that has become real, and the real thing, the consciousness, has become unreal. And so the inertia has to go. For the inertia to go, you need to do spiritual sadhana. You need to superimpose God on everything you see. In the Ishavasya Upanishad, the first mantra is, Ishavashyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Ishavashyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Superimpose God on everything you see. Don't see the world as world. Project consciousness on it. There is consciousness behind everything. A tree you see, an animal you see. An animal when you see, you must see it as a manifestation of the divine. A tree when you see, you must see it as a manifestation of the divine. When you see a human being, you must see as a manifestation of the divine, as a divine entity, the divine form. By constantly thinking like that, what happens? The inertia in the mind will come down. It gains the qualities of consciousness. It gains the qualities of the spirit, qualities of the Lord. Qualities of the Lord, what are these? Sat Chit Ananda is absolute existence, is absolute intelligence, and is absolute happiness. All these qualities will be added to your mind. The inertia in your mind will keep coming down gradually. Okay, the spiritual sadhana, this is a part of Jnana Yoga, where you superimpose God on everything you see. You don't see matter as matter. Matter actually is an evolution of the consciousness. Matter actually is a projection of the consciousness. The intelligence behind the matter is more important, not the matter as such. Matter is an effect, it is an outgrowth from where it has come. What is the cause? Cause is consciousness, cause is God. Same is with regard to sentient beings also, with regard to life forms also. They are not just life form, they are the expressions of the divine. There is consciousness behind every creature. The greatest expression of consciousness is through human being, as Swamiji says. All creatures are temples of God. Human being is the Taj Mahal among those temples. So the greatest temple, the highest expression of the divine. So if you learn to see every individual like this, that is the greatest sadhana in itself. In the beginning, it's only an intellectual idea. You keep practicing it day and night, day and night, day and night. Everything is Brahman, everything is consciousness. No human being actually, no separation. Nama, Rupa, it is just an illusion. Nama, Rupa is just a projection. The world is only in appearance. Consciousness behind it is alone is real. Consciously have this intellectual idea. After some time, you will have the realization. One day you will wake up with realization, you will only see, you will only experience everything as consciousness, everything as divine, everything as God. No distinction between the seer and the seen. Now there is a huge difference, the seen and the seer. I am the seer. Who am I? Okay? The external world, for example, this microphone becomes the object for my perception. Okay? In this Drugdrishya Viveka it comes. So my eye actually sees this microphone, right? My eye sees the microphone. This microphone becomes the object for my eye. My eye is the seer. This microphone is the seen. Right? Now, something happens to my eye. It has become red. Some dust has fallen into it. Who is experiencing the eye then? Eye cannot experience itself. It's the mind which perceives the eye. Okay, there is a trouble in the eye. As long as there is no trouble in the eye is looking at this microphone. This microphone becomes the object of perception for the eye. Eye becomes the seer, the microphone becomes the seen. So when something happens to the eye, somebody else notices it. It's the mind which notices something happened to the eye. So actually some medicine has to be put. You go to the doctor, so you'll get it repaired. Eye becomes the object, your mind becomes the subject. Eye becomes the seen, your mind becomes the seer. Something happens to the mind also. So there is so much of stress today in your mind, right? Positive thought, negative thought. Who is noticing that all? Mind itself cannot notice it. Somebody else must be there behind it. The mind has become the object. I have so much of stress. Stress is there in the mind. Somebody else is experiencing the stress that is going on in the mind. Who is that? It is the buddhi, it is the intellect. So intellect actually is experiencing. Intellect is saying that there is this stress in the mind, there is anxiety in the mind. So, who is experiencing the intellect? Intellect also becomes the object for somebody else. Who is that? That is spirit, that is consciousness. But all this, analysis is done by whom? All this analysis is done by whom? With what you did the analysis? With the help of buddhi only, with the help of intellect only, right? This analysis not that we have done now. This is the object for my eye becomes the object for the mind becomes the object for buddhi becomes the object for Atman, or consciousness, or God. Who is saying all this? Who is doing this discrimination? Who is doing this analysis? Buddhi is doing that analysis, right? Buddhi is doing this analysis. Buddhi has transcended, has gone beyond, and saying the Atman actually is the seer. I am the seen, Buddhi is saying. Atman is the seer. I am the seen. Does Buddhi know anything about the Atman? No, it has just made the guesswork there. So it has to go beyond itself. That it can't. So beyond it is grace. Beyond it is grace. Buddhi brings you up to this point and leaves you off. That's all. Buddhi brings you up to this point, where it says that I am also an object, I am also the seen. The seer is beyond me. But that seer actually, you have to come into your experience. That Atman has to come into your experience. For that you need to drop buddhi. For that you need to drop the mind itself. And then you experience the Atman as your true being. Then you experience the Atman as your true being. Then you understand that as the qualities of the Atman are Sat, Chit and Ananda. You are immortal, you are deathless, you are birthless. You go beyond all these pairs of opposites. So wherever there is life, there is a death actually. If you want to avoid death, you need to avoid life itself. Okay, you need to avoid life itself. That's why Swamiji says, go beyond. This thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death and death to birth. You see this thirst for life. Because of that only we are afraid of death. But wherever there is actual life, there is death. So if you want to actually overcome death, you need to go beyond life. This is a cycle. This is a great cycle actually. It's not easy to break through the cycle. For that actually you need to transcend the mind. But mind actually, kind of ghost that has taken possession of us completely. In this Kali Yuga, because people are more materialistic and we have increased the materialism more and more and are meditating on matter constantly day and night. We have given up the spirituality and spiritual sadhanas. An average individual, if you take, here and there a few individuals who have, who are struggling consciously. But the vast majority of the population are leading unconscious life. That means day and night they are thinking about only the objective world. They don't even know that mind gains more inertia. And then it becomes more difficult for you even to understand intellectually the spiritual path. Forget about doing sadhana and transcending the mind. That's a distant goal. Even to know that this world is Maya, even to know that this world is full of ignorance, becomes difficult intellectually. So they don't realize, this is the only world. 5 senses, whatever I perceive through the 5 senses, that's what alone is real. But our philosophy says it's not real, it's your perception. The experience is actually you're gaining through the mind, but the mind itself is unreal. And no two individuals have the same experience. That means what? The mind is not real. If the mind is real, everybody should have the same experience of life, same understanding of life. Why such a huge difference between individual and individual? Because it is not real. There is evolution is happening. The evolution is happening. As you progress more and more towards the truth, your perception of life gets enhanced. And to what extent? When you drop the mind, you are the absolute. And there actually you have the solution to this problem of life and problem of death. You have the solution for all these contradictions. Why there are two things. There is pain and there is pleasure in this world. Why can't I have only pleasure to the exclusion of pain? You can't. They are obverse and reverse of the same coin, good and evil. You can't have only good here. You can't have only pleasure here. You can't have only joy here. This is a relative world. So you need to transcend the relativity. You need to go beyond the relative world and get established in the absolute. There is a way. There is a way to overcome pain. How? Transcend the relative. Where is the relative? Is the mind. And just drop that and see what happens. You are the absolute. This distinction between seer and the seen all will vanish once for all. But that requires great courage. First of all, you need to understand intellectually. Then you have to put it into practice. You have to engage in sadhana. It may take 1 birth, it may take 2 births, it may take 10 births. It doesn't matter. That is the only goal I want to have for my life. It doesn't matter. It will happen one day. It will happen one day, but have that goal itself has become so difficult for us nowadays. And Swamiji, goes on explaining very beautifully this idea of Maya. This idea of Maya. There are, evolutionists. What they say is, they contradict this philosophy of Maya, theory of Maya, and they say, there is this. The good is actually gradually increasing the world. The evolution has a purpose. So a lot of good has happened over the last 5,000 years. And the caveman actually has suffered a lot. And the educated man is not suffering as much as the caveman had suffered. But that is not right. Caveman must have suffered definitely less than this present educated man, 21st century man. Is there any proof with you to prove that actually caveman suffered more than the modern educated man? Okay, caveman actually had to work a lot physically. He had to hunt for food. So this was a lot of physical struggle. But did he suffer as much actually as we are suffering today? No, I don't think. Do we have any proof that actually caveman, illiterate man, brute man, totally barbaric, totally uncultured, suffered more than the 21st century man? No, that's what Swamiji says. But actually evolutionist says a human being is evolving. In what sense actually? Slowly the more and more good is happening to the world, and there will come a time when there will be only good in the world and everybody will be happy. There's a millennium idea. We're all working towards that and struggling towards that. It is not happening. It will not happen, our philosophy says. It's a beautiful thing as an objective, but it will never come. Such a situation will never come. Because the life and death, they go together. The pain and pleasure, they go together. So that millennium idea, it's a beautiful hope. You can have that as a hope, but that hope actually will never get realized. There is no such thing as possible in this relative world. Our people have discovered that. So they want to have hope, because now actually there is a lot of suffering in the world, but there will come maybe after 50 years or 100 years, everybody will have all the desires fulfilled. The economies will increase and will improve. Okay, whole world will become richer and richer, and everybody will have under the sun the best comfort possible, and so there will not be any suffering in the world. Is it a fact? Will that happen ever? No, it's not going to happen. And also there are two fallacies here in this argument. That what they say is, what they understand is, good and evil are two absolute manifestations. Good and evil are two absolute manifestations. They are not absolute manifestations. What you call good today, tomorrow it may become evil. What is evil today, tomorrow it may become good, right? What is good in one society may be considered bad in another society. What is considered bad in one society may be considered good in another society. They are relative, right? Relative to cultures, relative to our perception, relative to our stage of life. A child does something, it's not bad. And the same thing actually if an elderly man, a grown-up man does, actually that's bad, right? A child can do anything because child has no discretion, right? It's okay with a child if he does something. But if the same actually is done by an elderly individual or a grown-up young man, then you consider it as bad. So it varies, depending upon the culture, depending upon, your age. So good and bad or evil are not two absolute things, absolute manifestations, they're relative. What you call in one culture as good, in another culture they consider as bad. So these evolutionists actually, because of their mistaken understanding, they think a good and evil are two separate entities and absolute manifestations. And so you can avoid evil totally, you can destroy evil totally, and there will come a time and stage in life, only there will be good and everybody will be happy and everybody will be having enormous happiness or enormous bliss. No, not possible, because just see the way we are constructed, the body and mind constantly changing in a flux. Not possible. So this is relative. So mind and body, as long as you are constituted the way you are now, there is no way, there is no hope for you to have absolute peace and happiness. You need to transcend this. You need to go beyond this. There is no other way. And there are agnostics again. What the agnostic says, anyway this world is like that. Okay, it may be constituted like that, right? Good and bad, they come together. Pain and pleasure, they come together. Why should I avoid, pleasure because there is some pain attached to this? I will seek it. I will seek it. No, I don't want to have an higher ideal in life. I don't know whether there is mukti, there is moksha. Will I get it in this birth or not? There is no guarantee. Then you are asking me to struggle for it. Why should I struggle? Why should I waste my time and energy in that direction? So the agnostics, they think they are practical people, but they are charvakas, they are pure materialists. They say, why to bother your head with all this kind of thinking and all the time, right? Just enjoy the world as long as you live, and then get out of the world happily and blissfully. Don't bother about, all these things, post-death happenings, what is going to happen, all those things. So, but that actually doesn't solve the problem of life. So already actually because of the competition, because of the population, because of this materialism, the human being, though he is struggling actually, nobody wants to be a bad guy, you need to understand. Everybody wants to be a good human being, noble human being. But the circumstances are not allowing them. The pressures of the material world are not allowing the human being, to be as good as he or she wants to be. The circumstances are not allowing. There is competition, there is struggle, there is a limited supply of resources. Then you will have to, jostle with others. In the process, man is actually behaving the way he is behaving. The fault doesn't lie with the individual as such, the fault lies with the times in which we are. So this agnostic position is also not correct. If you have no ideal, and you will become like a brute automatically. If pure materialism becomes your goal, right? If you identify with only 3 or 4 people of your family, my wife or my spouse, my husband, my children, only these are my own people. The rest are alien to me. I need to provide for them as best as I can and as much as I can. That is the reason there is so much of corruption in the world, right? So the rest of them are alien to me. Then you become automatically an immoral human being, a dishonest human being, unscrupulous human being. Once you become dishonest, unscrupulous and immoral, there is no way you can have true peace of mind. Like your own conscience actually smites you from within. So morality is necessary prerequisite, is sine qua non. If you don't have a moral background and a moral life, you can't really lead a meditative life. You can't go or progress towards the truth. You have to have morality is a foundation. That is the foundation on which actually you can have your sadhana, and then you will reach the truth. That's why our culture says dharma, artha and kama moksha. Artha and kama you can enjoy, but they must become subservient to dharma. You must give highest importance to dharma. You can enjoy kama and you can have artha also. Our culture says, but according to dharma. So that becomes possible only when moksha is your goal. If that ideal component is removed from our lives, moksha is not your goal, you will become a devil by default. You will become an extremely selfish individual. Only because I have an aspiration, highest aspiration, I want to attain moksha, I want to attain God. Because you have that highest ambition, morality becomes important for you. Honesty becomes important for you. Even at the cost of life, I will not give up my honesty, because if I die, I will get a rebirth. Again, I will be born. I will get a body. But if I indulge in immoral activities, I will go back. I will get in an animal birth. So I am going back in evolution. I am not going forward. It's not a wise way of living, right? You want to go forward. Do you want to go backward? If you are immoral, if you are dishonest, you are going backward. From here, again you will get an animal birth. So the temptation of the world, I will be able to overcome. Temptation for material things, temptation for more money, temptation for more wealth, you will be able to overcome only when you have this moksha as the goal. You will become a honest human being, you will become actually a moral human being, because my goal is mukti. To attain to mukti, morality is necessary. So if everybody has that goal in life, everybody will become a noblest human being. But today people are not that noble because they don't have this aspiration. Their goal is not mukti. They don't want to attain God. They don't want to reach the absolute. They want to make the best of the relative. You will never be able to make the best of the relative. So, if this ideal component is not there in our lives, we will by default become extremely selfish individuals. They will take upper hand. Human beings will become like devils. Okay? They are extremely selfish individuals. And a weak society will be created out of that. So it's very important that what aspiration you have. For centuries, for millennia, we have had this mukti as a goal, and we have given this up, unfortunately, in the last 30-40 years. Without that ideal component, if you subscribe to the agnostic's view, mukti cannot be attained immediately, mukti cannot be attained that easily, the world cannot be explained that easily. So it's a difficult thing. Why you bother your head with all these things? Having ideal, having goal, having a high objective, which cannot be reached that easily. Go for pure materialism, just enjoy, eat, drink and make merry. Don't bother actually, borrow money and enjoy like Charvaka. So, that's not the solution. Without the ideal, there won't be any difference between animal and human being. If you ask me, human beings will become worse than animals. It is this ideal, it is this goal, it is the objective that is set before you. And when you struggle consciously to reach that objective, you will become the greatest human being and you will become God-like. And in the end, actually, you will become God yourself. People like Satya Harishchandra, you just see Shiva Chakravarti, what kind of temptation they could overcome. Satya Harishchandra, just death stared at his face. He did not bother. Okay, it doesn't matter. I will embrace death, but I will not tell a lie. I will not go for untruths. How could he muster that much of courage? Because his goal was moksha, mukti. Body goes and comes. What is there? What is death? A small thing. Body will go, another body will come. Why should I fear death? But I don't want to go backward. So if I tell a lie, if I become unscrupulous, if I become dishonest, immoral, I will get an animal birth. I don't want that. I want to avoid that kind of pain that is intrinsic to an animal birth. Now, hereafter it is evolution and involution, both. You can progress forward and move towards God and truth, or you can go backward also. Law of karma comes into force, comes into application from human being onwards. That's the reason, morality. Our Rishis have understood that. That's why they insisted on simple life. If you want to have more of material things, you need to be in competition with other fellow human beings. In the process, you won't become that noble. You will not manifest highest character. Love and kindness become very rare qualities. You want to have love and kindness in your being, you need to be unselfish. You need to be self-sacrificing. These virtues you would be able to cultivate only when you have that ideal component, only when you have mukti or moksha as the goal. And only those beings who have this highest goal will become Dhira Purusha, Dhira Manavas. That's important. Ideal. So this agnostic position is not correct. Like Swamiji says, they will tell you, they will tempt you, saying that, don't bother. Why break your head all this philosophical nonsense? They might tempt you, but don't get tempted, Swamiji clearly says. Truth must be the goal, and I must reach truth. How much strength I have? Will I be able to reach it in this birth? Well, not necessary, but as much as that you can struggle. You struggle towards the truth consciously. That society is the greatest society which has the highest number of people who are struggling consciously towards the truth. India has had that population, right? But still, if you ask me, in which country actually the greatest number of people are struggling consciously towards the truth, that is India, you know. That's not because of, the modern governments. That's because of the spiritual wealth that we have inherited from our rishis, our forefathers. So much of spiritual wealth they have given us. You can't escape from the spiritual ideal. Sometime it will fall into your ears. You will long for it. There are still people who are struggling, who are trying to keep that flame of renunciation blaze forth all the time. Renunciation, you attain immortality. So hold forth to that. All religions in the world basically are just struggles to help man conquer nature. The mind actually asks you to behave in a particular way. Okay? So you don't want to follow the dictates of mind all the time. Your discretion is saying this is wrong, but the mind is saying go for it, do it. The samskara is saying, but you have a filter. You will have the faculty of discrimination. I will discriminate. No, I will not give expression to this idea. It's not a noble idea. Right? You have the faculty of discrimination. You can say no. For all the impulses that surface in your mind, that come into your mind, if you give expression to it, you will become worse than an animal. You just see your mind. We don't give expression to all that happens in the mind. So you have to develop that's right kind of slavery you don't want. So nature is saying you just live under the tree. Okay? Expose yourself to sun and to rain and suffer. But you want to defy nature. I don't want to suffer. So you go for a house. You build a house. Right? You want to defy nature all the time if you just seek. Your struggle is just to defy nature. That is external, physical nature. You want a house, actually you want to overcome the physical suffering of the physical nature. But this psychological nature, here also there is struggle going on. There are so many impulses that are not noble. You don't want to give expression. You are fighting with your own mind. Fight. That is a genuine fight, a great fight. You need to fight. For that, actually, you need to have quality time. That quality time you will get only when you lead a simple life. Maybe people will not appreciate you. It doesn't matter. Because I am conscious of my inner struggle. I don't want to have this kind of slavery. I am struggling towards mukti. And that becomes possible for you when you understand that the Lord is dwelling in your own heart. The absolute, the force that has created this universe is dwelling in your own heart. It's not a small thing, but now it is so dormant. The expression is so feeble. The manifestation is so dim because of the gross tamasic nature of the mind. It is not allowing that spiritual force to find full expression through you. Only a meager expression you are able to, give. For that to manifest more and more, the conscious spiritual sadhana is necessary. So you will try to overcome nature. One day you will become successful. You have to. There is no other option. You have to, because there is the Lord, there is that spirit. That is the infinite dimension of your personality. Infinite actually longing to become the infinite again. You can't suppress that voice. Impossible. Mind may say, no, go for the material comfort. Just be in the world. Don't bother about all the spiritual things. Not possible, because the spirit is eternal. The eternal spark is in you. The Lord says, Mamayvamsho jivaloke jivabhutaha sanatanaha. That spark is eternal spark. That is a deathless spark. That deathless, that infinite actually, longing to become the infinite again. It wants to break through the conditioning. It wants to break through the limitation, namely the body and mind. So that has to find full expression. That becomes possible through spiritual sadhana and through unconditioning of mind, through selflessness, by doing good to others. All these things are only to achieve that end, to have the spirit, the immortal dimension of my being, find full expression, total expression. How much you can manifest again? Okay, infinite cannot find expression, full expression through the finite. Definitely it's not possible. We worship, we revere people like Buddha, Vivekananda, Rama, Krishna, okay, all these people. In them actually the spirit had found the greatest expression. Greatest expression of the spirit became possible through their personalities because they became totally unselfish, totally desireless. But still, how much actually an individual, a physical entity, a psychological entity, can express himself or can give expression to the spirit? No, it's only a meager expression, definitely, not the highest. The spirit is spirit. Infinite can never find full expression to the finite. Having understood this, our people actually retrace their steps back. So it is not just seeking the full expression through the finite, it's not possible, finite is finite. So they withdrew and just got established themselves in the true nature. The infinite has become the infinite again. You just drop the finite, you will remain as the infinite. What is the finite in you? The body and mind. This attachment to this body and mind, this attachment and identification with the appendages, identification with the upadhis, the adjuncts must go. The sooner, the better for you. So the struggle must be not to identify with the body and mind. We have discussed these sadhanas also many times. That I am not the body, I am not the mind. That's the one sadhana that you can do. Repetition of God's name will help you a lot, definitely. Meditation will help you because it helps you to purify the mind, to gain more sattva, more clarity. You will have in life. Yesterday somebody came, one doctor came, because he studied in our Purulia Ramakrishna Mission School. So there it was compulsory for every student to meditate for 15 minutes or 20 minutes per day. And he was telling me, the Swamiji, because they forced, in the beginning they found it a little difficult, because children, they don't like anything to be enforced upon them. But over the year I could clearly feel and see, because of the meditative habit that I could develop, because I was part of that school, it became very easy for me to concentrate on my medical studies. What actually other individual would take 5 hours or 10 hours to grasp an idea, to understand and to remember, for me it would be over in 1 hour itself. I could clearly see that my faculties have become more sharpened, my faculties have become more, clear. So even to enhance the faculty of understanding, faculty of memory, to remember things better and to understand things better, to have more clarity, it's important that you purify the mind through meditation. What it does, the meditation does, for the matter, all the spiritual sadhanas, what they do, they remove the impurity in you. What is that impurity? The tamas. The lesser the tamas that you have, the greater the purity that you have in mind. The tamas and rajas, those two components, if you reduce, and if you increase the quantum of sattva in you, and automatically the mind becomes more clear, and more purity has come into your mind, means your perception of life will be better. You will appreciate the spiritual things. You will see the scheme of things, the divine scheme of things, far clearer than any other individual. And once you get this clarity, it's just a matter of time. Afterwards, you will just do more sadhana, you will be able to intensify it, and you will travel towards the truth. If you're fortunate, you will get it in this birth itself. Once you become an enlightened human being, you are just a blessing, not to yourself. You are a blessing to your family, you are a blessing to the society, you are a blessing to the whole world. So, try to become such a blessing, not to yourself, to the whole world. Possibility is there. Long for that. Pray to the divine. I want to have that possibility in me. I want to realize the truth. Strengthen this longing and things will happen. We desire so many things, but we need to desire only the thing, that absolute, the God and the truth. Other things will happen incidentally. As much as our prarabdha is there, whatever these material things should accrue, how much of to accrue to us, that would come to us automatically. You don't have to struggle for these things. They will come to you automatically without much struggle. Once actually you become more spiritual, you turn inward, quality of life will improve significantly. You keep improving it continuously and constantly, there will come a time when you experience your real nature as the absolute. So, shall we make our struggle more conscious from today onwards? Right. We'll stop here for today. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyanti, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Harihi Om Tassat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.